Hey, everybody. In September, we are switching the name of our podcast to Unpacking with Sarah so that we can be more inclusive. It will feature all of our Daisy Girl Communications audio content to include the Unpacking Mormonism podcast, the Unpacking with Sarah podcast, and the Raising Crazy Growing Up to Show Up podcast. Our show is meant for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice or counsel of your personal care providers. If you or someone you know is in a mental health crisis, please call or text 988. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. We are your hosts, Sarah and Mason Westbrook. We're excited to be here and talk about how all of the prophets, seers, and revelators of the Mormon Church, how they are liars. Go ahead, Mason. This is.
Oh, you got to say the title. This is which series is this? Because I'm
sorry, Mason. Mason is too afraid to say words that have pictorial references.
Pictorial references.
So, pictorial references. Emojicons, right? Emojicons. This is I shit you not. The prophets are liars, and we are very excited to be here with you today. All right. So, Mason. The man uncomfortable with the word shit, even though I've heard you say it, especially when you're out with the horses. He says shit. All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. So kind of an idea that came out of the last couple episodes that we've had. And as we've done those other episodes, we had just a little bit more material, I think, than we were expecting, and just with the conversation, the way things came out, we just pushed those things off to another time. But really what I wanted to talk about is the fact that the leadership, and specifically prophets, but some of the
self-proclaimed prophets.
Well, some of the examples I have are from people who were actually the president of the church at the time, and others are from apostles or whatever.
Still self-proclaimed.
Well, and let me just start by saying this, like this is every general conference, they do what's called sustaining of general authorities. And part of that sustaining includes this line. It is proposed that we sustain the counselors in the first presidency and the quorum of the 12 apostles as prophets, seers, and revelators. So really, they've set themselves up for that statement. So any apostle who says something that is then found to be a lie is a prophet lying. And I just wanted to start with, right off the bat, the first one is from Joseph Smith, because of course we just start at the beginning.
Start at the beginning of the liar.
And there's two things that
pants on fire.
Right, there's two things that I wanted to bring up. And there's lots of different examples that people have found about Joseph Smith lying, or just, things that just weren't true. You can talk about, the origins of the Book of Mormon or the first vision, all that stuff. But those things can't necessarily be proven as lies, but this one can.
Right.
And so, Alex, if you can pull up the Joseph Smith quote. So what a thing it is for a man to be accused of committing adultery and having 7 wives when I can only find one, is a quote from Joseph Smith Jr. In response to accusations of adultery and having 7 wives, and continued, I am the same man and as innocent as I was 14 years ago, and I can prove them all perjurers. Just for a timeline, if he's saying, because I'm not exactly sure when this was said, but if he's saying 14 years ago, this is probably sometime around 1844, because the church was organized in 1830. Book of Mormon came out and was published in 1829, 1830. So this is all near the end of Joseph Smith's life in Nauvoo, when it is well documented that he had multiple wives.
Over 30, I believe.
Right.
So whoever said he only had 7 was wrong.
Right.
But it was an underestimation, not an overestimation.
Right. And there's plenty of evidence to demonstrate that he was married to multiple women at that point in time.
And so lying about it.
Right. So what I want to point out here is, not only do they lie, but they gaslight you to make it seem as if that's not the case. Not only is he saying, no, I'm not doing, he doesn't just say, no, I'm not doing that. He says, oh my gosh, what a thing to be accused of adultery when I can only find one wife. It's this big dramatic, almost a jab at whoever's saying it. How could you possibly say something like that when it's just not true? Why would you attack me that way?
The gaslighting part isn't just, I can't believe you're accusing me of that, but it's the flip of, I can prove them all perjurers. Right. So when you gaslight, you not only challenge the reality of the person you're gaslighting, but you also often will do this blame reversal where it's like, well, and I can prove it. I can, right. I will prove them to be perjurers. And there's those really strong words. So it's, I can prove that they're lying. I will show them. And really, I mean, how do you prove that you're not sleeping around? So I'll just give this little story. So when I was very young, probably 14, 15 years old, I had the privilege of meeting Robin Williams. There's no picture evidence of it. So, and he's since
obviously didn't happen.
Right. And he's since passed away. So whether or not I'm being honest about it, you can't prove it because there's no evidence. So generally when you're committing adultery, I mean, at least I know when I committed adultery, we didn't take any pictures of it. And we did a really good job of keeping everything on the down low because, of course, you don't want to get caught. And so there's no way for me to prove that I met Robin Williams. Now, there's another story. I've met Denzel Washington as well. He visited, I think it was Fort Bliss. Yeah, it was Fort Bliss in El Paso. And I happened to be there. So I have a picture of Denzel Washington, but I don't have a picture of me with Denzel Washington, because it was like the crowd, like when I say I met him, it's not like we sat down and had a conversation. So, but now I know, right? That would be an actor that I would love to sit down. Hey, Denzel, if you're listening to this, I would love to do lunch with you. But I sat, I didn't sit down. He wouldn't have any idea who I am. But how can I then twist that? I've met Denzel Washington. I could play with that in all certain different ways. And I have picture evidence, but I'm not in it. And so really, when we're looking at this, I'm going to, when we look at somebody's honesty, there's usually evidence that's much more tangible that can demonstrate that, there is this. So I gave Kelly Sweet, who now goes as Halian. That's our cat Satan that just walked through the background. She is evil, just so y'all know. So Satan's evil, and you just got to meet evil Satan, who's probably going to walk back and forth a couple times.
Moving along.
So anyway, I trained Kelly Sweet, who now goes as Halian, for a few short months. Now, the difference is I have picture evidence of that. I had personal conversations with Kelly. I still have occasional check-ins with Kelly. And if you were to sit down with Kelly and talk to her and you were like, hey, do you know Sarah Westbrook? She would be able to be like, yeah, hey, I do know her. And if you buy her very first album, All is One, I think is the name of it. I'd have to go back and look at it, but just look up Kelly Sweet. Her very first album before she changed her name. We Are One. Thank you. And you read the credits, it says thank you to Sarah Westbrook right in there. And so, when we're talking about truth and lies with religion, it's really easy to make claims with no evidence because the prophets of the Mormon Church for years have claimed that they have conversations with Jesus, but none of them have a picture with them. None of them have any evidence. You just have to take their word for it. And so really, when you're looking at how do I know that somebody's lying? How do I know that Sarah's being honest about the fact that she met Robin Williams and Denzel Washington, even though there's very little evidence and neither of those individuals would be able to say, oh yeah, I know who Sarah Westbrook is by how I conduct myself in other areas. If I have a history of being dishonest and it can be proven or demonstrated with tangible evidence, then it makes my claims that I've met Robin Williams and Denzel Washington a little sketchy. Whereas if all of the evidence surrounding me demonstrates that I'm an honest person and that I'm not an exaggerator and these other things, well, then it's likely that those things that I claim where there is no evidence are true. And so I think as we're looking at our prophets, seers, and revelators, they make these claims that we're supposed to have faith to believe in. Now, this is not just in the Mormon Church. This is in everything. You're going to see this in politics. You're going to see this in religions of all places. You're going to see this in your own workplaces and in professional organizations, and also with your personal family members. Like when I was in my 20s and struggling with exaggeration, it makes sense that people didn't believe me even when I was telling the truth, because I had a tendency to exaggerate and grow stories into something that was obviously not true. And I was terrible at it. I mean, I was good at the exaggerating, but terrible at being honest, which I talk about a lot in my book, Trauma Bonded, and why that happened for me. But if that's my history, then it makes sense that people would question the things that I said. Now, if you know me today, you know that I am very honest, oftentimes to a fault, because I've worked really hard on that, and that's important to me now. And so the people in my inner circle who know me now are going to trust the things that I say to be plain and simple honesty, because there's tangible evidence for most of the things that I say. And so I think really where the prophets, seers, and revelators of the Mormon Church get away with it is that we're taught from the time we're itty bitty that they are as godlike as possible on this earth, that they are near perfect. And because of that, anything they say, no matter whether or not there is evidence, or even when there is tangible evidence, we still believe what the prophet says, no matter what. Like, we will turn a blind eye. And that's also how narcissists will eventually get it. So that way the victim starts to question their own reality. It becomes such common occurrences, and there's just enough there to really make you question what's real and what's not real, to the point of the victim ends up, when they escape, really struggling with staying in contact and trust and those types of things. So anyway, go ahead. I'll turn it back over to you.
Are you sure?
You keep looking at me like, come on, Sarah, get to the point. I thought I made it quite nicely. All right, go. Your turn.
Okay. So yeah, the gaslighting that goes along, and I love that you did take it into the direction of, that's how narcissists work too, because of course this is about mental health. It's about recognizing when you're in a situation that isn't as it appears to be.
Well, and my personal belief is that Joseph Smith absolutely struggled with narcissism. Right. For sure. Like, I just look at the evidence, and that screams narcissistic personality disorder. And I believe that President Oaks and President Nelson also struggle with it. And when I say struggle with it, I don't know if they enjoy it or if it's a struggle. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that it's something that's difficult. And they're, just because of their position, they're so tied up in this is who I'm supposed to be, that they have a difficult time shedding that. Because if they became honest in the way that I would hope that they could be honest, what are the consequences of that? And I'm sure that the consequences of that feel overwhelming. All right, now I'll really let you go. I'll shut up here. Oh, my hands are over now.
I'm sure that in any situation, we see it with celebrities all the time where, their behavior just becomes atrocious because they get away with it. They're allowed. Well, any situation where you're venerated beyond belief.
What's venerated?
Like adored and adulated and respected.
Then he uses the word like adulated.
Beyond the point of just normal respect, you run the risk of falling into a situation where that is the case, where you are not now really responsible for your behavior. No one really calls you to task. When Joseph Smith said those things, people did call him to task. It was a little bit of a different generation. And how did he respond? He destroyed the printing press.
Right.
He gaslit people. Right. He threw a big tantrum. And the next piece of that is also how the church continues to pass that on. If you can pull up section 132, Alex, this is it, the heading of Doctrine and Covenants, section 132. And it says, revelation given through Joseph Smith, the prophet at Nauvoo, Illinois, recorded July 12th, 1843, relating to the new and everlasting covenant, including the eternity of the marriage covenant and the principle of plural marriage. Although the revelation was recorded in 1843, evidence indicates that some of the principles involved in this revelation were known by the prophet as early as 1831. And what that tells me...
I'm going to reach across you real quick. Keep going.
What that tells me now, on the other side, being able to see the real history as it is that this is their way of covering up behavior that was questionable from Joseph Smith from the very beginning. If you start talking about Fanny Alger, if you start talking about the accusations that when he was tarred and feathered in 1831, there was a doctor there to castrate him because of advances that had been made. I don't think that we have any evidence to show that that actually happened for sure, but there is evidence to suggest that that's the case.
Right. I think the story is that he was there and then he walked away.
Right. The doctor refused to do that procedure, but he was there.
Right.
And the fact that he was tarred and feathered in 1831, there was very little about Joseph Smith's behavior or the church's behavior that would indicate the need to attack the prophet or the president of that church. So it lends itself to the possibility that was an accurate accusation. But anyway, this is the church's way of gaslighting and saying, well, it looks like he probably knew about this as early as 1831, when in reality, all you're doing is saying it looks like there was behavior from Joseph Smith to indicate that he, quote unquote, knew this stuff. It seems more likely that Joseph Smith was doing these kinds of things. And then later on, when he had the power that he had in 1843 as mayor, as president of the church,
right,
as basically God in the city of Nauvoo, then he put it down as a revelation. I'm going to pursue this wholeheartedly. But this is just the church's way of gaslighting and saying, trying to cover up the fact that this behavior was not appropriate. And they're trying to cover it up with the possibility this revelation existed before it did.
Right. Well, and I think it's important to keep in mind how much Joseph Smith was almost worshipped. It's kind of funny. Instead of the church name being the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I think that it's more appropriate to say it's the Church of Joseph Smith of Latter-day Saints, I guess. I don't know. Joseph Smith Saints, something along those lines, because he could do no wrong. He was speaking for God. It was one of those, I will give into things I probably wouldn't normally give into because it's Joseph Smith,
sure,
the prophet. Right. And then I think, too, it's important for us to set our intention. So how do you correct these things? Because as we go through some of where this pattern of dishonesty shows up both in Joseph Smith's day and then in modern day. Because if we did all of the prophets, we would be here all day long. And I'm not super great at the details and remembering all of those intricacies, which is why we're going to give you some reference stuff here in a little bit. And we will reference all of this in the show notes. But the cure for narcissism, the cure for dishonesty is accountability. And one of the things that you're going to see in somebody who truly has narcissistic personality disorder, you have to look at their intent. Number one, they have an intent to not be discovered. And that there is some maliciousness to it. So a lot of times people will struggle with accountability, but they're not narcissists. There's a different intent to it. And so that's really where it becomes difficult for a quote unquote diagnosis. If you would like to donate to our show, you can do so through Venmo at Daisy Girl Communications. Of narcissism, but the cure is accountability and empathy, recognizing how the dishonesty and the gaslighting is harming others, putting yourself in their shoes and viewing the world from somebody else's perspective, but also that accountability piece. And I think that that's really where I struggle as we move forward through these, is that there's absolutely no accountability for the actions of humans. And in fact, I feel like the church, since Joseph Smith's time, Joseph Smith talks about, I'm going to call it sexual coercion at getting individuals like Helen Mar Kimball to marry him. There was coercion in your family's going to get eternal life. That the whole idea of an angel with a flaming sword came down and told me that if I don't practice this polygamy, I'm going to be damned forever. These types of things is coercion. It's blamed on God. It's not, I struggled with sexual predatory behaviors and acted in this way and blamed God because that was how I would, get my yayas, whatever. He's not able to do that, but that is the cure. And I know that, speaking personally, when I was struggling with being dishonest in my 20s, one of the things that my counselor, Jim, made sure that I was aware of was that accountability and also creating that tangible evidence. So that way I would be more believable. But it was that you have to be accountable even when you've exaggerated, like in the moment, as soon as you recognize it, be accountable. So I remember like sitting in the doctor's office and think, you know what, I'm probably exaggerating the symptoms a little bit here. I'm really, really burned out. I'm really, really tired. Let me, back that down. It actually looked more like this. And it was amazing to me as I took that just very straight up accountability for when I was struggling with honesty, how much more interpersonal connection I experienced, how much healing I experienced, and the discovery that the truth is really the safest place to live in. Yeah. And so that's kind of like our mental health takeaway as we go through. So.
Yeah, and you could probably, if you took the time, you could take the church as an organization and compare it maybe to an abusive family situation.
Oh, I absolutely would, yeah.
And that might be helpful in kind of seeing the way that the church manipulates the people that are in it, the same way that an abusive husband or an abusive wife would
an abusive
manipulate.
Partner. Let's just say an abusive partner.
An abusive parent mostly is what I'm looking at in this situation. You manipulate your partner, you manipulate the children, and you gaslight, and there's lots of abuse going on. But if it was only abuse, people probably would walk away a lot faster. But because there's abuse and there's there's the whole gaslighting of I'll never do it again, or I love you so much, or I only do this because I love you. All the things that abusers will say that are meant to keep somebody in that situation. Well, if you can then take that and extrapolate to a bigger organization like the church, they do the same things. They say the same things. And the next example I have.
Well, so before you do that, I would say it's that they are able to say these things and shift the individual's reality.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's really where it's the shifting of an individual's reality so that their choices are based on a false narrative, on an like factually untrue narrative. You're causing a great deal of harm.
Yeah.
So, all right, go ahead.
So there's one more example that I have from the distant past, and then I just want to talk about a couple from the recent past. But this is actually the manifesto, commonly called the manifesto. It's the official declaration number 1 in the Doctrine and Covenants at the end. This is where Wilford Woodruff gets up and states that we're not living the law of polygamy anymore. But I just want to read a couple of things. Like, it starts out, the second paragraph says,
it's right there, I therefore.
Yeah, I'm looking for exactly what I wanted here.
To whom it may concern, blah, blah, blah.
I can read. Just hold on a second.
Okay, ready? Radio silence.
So it's the second paragraph. I, therefore, as president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, do hereby in the most solemn manner declare that these charges are false. We are not teaching polygamy or plural marriage, nor permitting any person to enter into its practice, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes down to the fourth one, and this is where it's just sticky, icky language. So in the fourth paragraph...
It's near true, but not really.
Well, and he just states...
It appears true, but it's really
He just states that there was an investigation that 40 some odd marriages had been entered into, and he says that's just not true. And then he comes down to the fourth one, and this is what's sticky to me, is he says, inasmuch as laws have been enacted by Congress forbidding plural marriages, which laws have been pronounced constitutional by the Supreme Court, I hereby declare my intention to submit to those laws and to use my influence with the members of the church over which I preside to have them do likewise.
How many wives did Wilford Woodruff have?
Well, so that's not even the point. The point here is that he says, it is my intention to follow those laws, almost as if I'm stating from this moment, I intend to follow those laws. Mm-hmm. But you just said that all these marriages that they said happened didn't happen because we're not teaching that anymore. You've just publicly declared your intention to follow the laws. The other thing...
But pause, I have a question for you. If you and I got divorced and you were still an active Mormon, would you be able to get sealed to another woman without terminating our sealing?
I'd have to get permission from you.
Okay. And even if I said no, and the first presidency was like, well, she's a bitch, could you get sealed to another woman while I'm still alive? What if I die?
Oh, without question.
if you die, can I go get married to somebody else in the temple?
Not unless you cancel our sealing.
Right. So what does that mean? That means we're still teaching the plurality of marriage, but it's the one-way plurality.
Not the point.
I think
the point is the lying and the gaslighting.
All right, I'll get off my soapbox.
The point is, the next thing that he says is, I intend to use my influence with the members of the church to have them do likewise. That's just a piece of crap statement. Like, as president of the church, I intend to use my influence, quote unquote, with the members to have them do the same thing.
Right. Well, because it's like, we're not doing it, but with my influence, I'll make sure they all stop.
Right. It's just it's a demonstration, and it's twisty language. So something you might not even recognize if you weren't paying attention to it. It's twisty language that
says, be honest,
is showing that maybe what I'm saying isn't exactly what's going to happen. And of course, that was demonstrated. There was a second manifesto 30 years later, 20 years later, to finally stop, plural marriage. And so just recognizing that that's not what happened. As you look at the details, you can see that there was just straight out lying going on. And that's just one of those other examples.
Right. Well, and I wonder how history would be different if they had, said, hey, this is part of our religious belief. We are doing this. We understand it's difficult for many people to understand, but we're going to enact the freedom of religion practices that is our right in this country. But yes, we are. And we will only solicit other humans that believe the same way we do to enter into this practice. I wonder how history would be different if they had demonstrated accountability and honesty.
Right.
Because I think it would be vastly different. I think the reason the Missourians were so angry at the Mormons wasn't because they were practicing plural marriage. It was because they were soliciting people who didn't believe in that practice, or tricking people who didn't believe in that practice into practicing it. And so the Missourians were pissed.
For the most part.
Go Missourians!
For the most part, Missouri's anger with the church didn't have anything to do with polygamy, but there were other things going on as well, too, that we just don't talk about, we don't acknowledge, we just roll with it. So,
all right, recent past.
The next one is
am I right? Recent past.
Yeah,
recent past.
It's incredibly famous in the ex-Mormon world. It was the little devotional that was done with Elder Ballard and Elder Oaks. And if you can pull up Elder Ballard, the Ballard one there, Alex, which I cannot read very well here, so let me just pull it up on mine here too.
Yeah, it's teensy.
So this is just kind of a report on it. I'm just going to read this real quick. It says, Elder Ballard spoke of criticisms to the effect that the church has hidden the fact that there is more than one rendition of Joseph Smith's first vision. The facts are we don't study. We don't go back and search what has been said on the subject. For example...
Pause. So who are they blaming here? This is that gaslighting. The fact is we don't study. They're blaming the people who didn't know about it. They're not taking accountability that those other versions were hidden and buried and for a while claimed to be anti-Mormon and not true. So that's where that gaslighting happens. It's very subtle, but that's how a narcissist works. What they are claiming or blaming is subtle. It feels believable because the fact is most Mormons probably don't study as much as they're told to study. It's impossible to study as much. I mean, I know it was impossible for me because I had kids, like an hour a day of Book of Mormon reading. Like there was just no way I would have been able to do that. That's Satan making noise over there, not our kids. So my Satan the cat. So that's where that subtle, I'm going to blame the people who didn't know rather than take accountability that those other accountings of the first vision were buried and difficult to find. Go ahead. And
just so this statement here, the facts are we don't study. We don't go back and search what has been said on the subject. For example, Dr. James Allen of BYU in 1970 produced an article in the church magazines explaining all about the different versions of the first vision.
So you missed the one article.
Well, let me just tell you what's wrong with that statement. Yes, one article. 1970, if you go back right now and you take a look at what is available to you on the church website from church magazines, they start in 1971. It's not even available to members unless you go outside of church resources to find it,
which is a no-no.
You're constantly told not to do.
No.
So this is, again, gaslighting. It's right there. Why are you guys not studying it? Yeah, it's right there. Why are you guys not studying it? It's right there. That is gaslighting at its finest, because it's not just right there.
We're shaming you for not knowing about something that happened for a lot of people before you were born.
Right. How many of us have gone back at those former ensigns? Like you said, you can barely keep up with the church conferences that come every 6 months.
Well, and your living prophets are more important than dead prophets. So I'm supposed to study what the current prophet says, not what the old one said, probably because if I discover what the old one says, I'm going to have concerns.
Also, not a prophet. James B. Allen of BYU is a professor at BYU, has no official standing with the church.
Gaslighting.
Period. End of sentence.
We should have named this gaslighting.
Right.
Like with the Grease song.
Grease lightning, yeah. The other thing is he says that explaining all about the different versions of the first vision, which is hogwash. Go read the article. It doesn't explain all about the different versions. It mentions.
Did you read it?
I have not read it.
So then how do you know?
Because I've listened to people who have talked about it.
Oh, we got to read it before you. Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, go and read it. Read it for yourself. But he doesn't talk all about them. He mentions them basically, and it does not get down into the details of what's different. For one, they don't really discuss the fact that they are significantly different.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It makes sense that there's more than one version, because if something that significant happened in my life, I would talk about it or write about it more than once.
Right.
The issue is that each version is, well, not each one is significantly different, but a couple of them are very significantly different.
Yeah. And not just somebody's report of them. One of them is in Joseph Smith's own handwriting.
Right.
One of them is the official version, and they don't match in significant ways.
Correct.
So again, not here to talk about those versions, but about the lying that's going on. So
if you're interested, go look it up. There's plenty of places to do it.
Numerous podcasts that are talking about those things, because the first vision is a big deal, because Gordon B. Hinckley said that the church hinges on the first vision. If the first vision happened, church is true. If it didn't, not true, kind of a thing. And so then Elder Ballard is quoted as having said this: "We would have to say, as two apostles who have covered the world and know the history of the church and know the integrity of the first presidency and the Quorum of the 12 from the beginning, there has been no attempt on the part of the church leaders to try to hide anything from anybody."
That proves what I said earlier, that because of their position as prophets, seers, and revelators, we are just supposed to believe them because they have covered the world. They know the history of the church. They have integrity. Why the hell are you questioning them?
Right.
That is that gaslighting of, don't question me because of my position as a prophet, seer, and revelator. As long as you follow us, you will be safe forever. And if we fuck it up, you'll still go to heaven because we're the prophet. And so if you fuck it up and we go to heaven, then it's on us.
Right.
But then they get the second anointing.
Right.
Which then they get the second anointing, which means they go to heaven no matter what they do.
Right. So let me pull a couple of pieces out of there that I find are important. So we'd have to say, as two apostles who have covered the world. Have they? They've been to a lot of places. Have they covered the world? No. And know the history of the church. Okay, well, if they know the history of the church, they know in that moment they're lying to your face. If they know the history of the church as they claim, they know that what they're about to say is full of lies. Secondly, and know the integrity of the first presidency and the Quorum of the 12 from the beginning. So now not only do they know the people they work with, but they know every other apostle and prophet who's ever been a part of the church. It's crap. You're making an assumption. You can assume that they were full of integrity, but you don't know.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What stopped you from thinking that way or feeling that way when you were all in?
Oh, you mean this that I never saw?
Yes.
Right.
No, I'm asking.
No, that's my point. I never saw this.
So when you hear the church leaders telling you, we've covered the world, you just need to trust us, we have so much integrity, blah, blah, blah. What was your response to something like that? Because that's not the only time they would have said that.
Right. My response would have been a normal Mormon all-in kind of a thing where I would just expect that they were telling the truth.
But why?
Because I believed that they were true prophets.
And what stopped you from questioning that?
Why? Why would you question it if you believe that they're true prophets and you believe that God has told you that that's the case? Why would you question it?
So what I hear you saying is, if I had questioned it, there would have been consequences. So it was easier to just go along.
Well, so there's another...
Or I might be putting words
into his mouth. So there's another piece of that.
Putting words into his mouth.
That's not what I said, but there is another piece of that in that, let's go back to the example of an abusive situation in a family. Why do you stay? It's because... And I'll just use...
I need you to stop. So I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you. Stop talking in absolutes because there's a lot of contextual differences.
Okay.
So sometimes in families, or oftentimes in families where abuse is present, keep going.
That's actually what I meant to say, but okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes what's happening, and I'll just go with the example of an abusive father because it tends to be more common than an abusive mother.
Tends to be more talked about.
Okay, tends to be more talked about.
So we'll say it.
But in the case of an abusive father, what do they have? They're the ones that provide. And usually there's no attempt to help a mom be independent in any way. And really, I'm just trying to take this to an example of the church. This is an example of an abusive situation. Mom doesn't feel like she has the ability to get away because she doesn't have the ability to support herself. She has kids. He's controlling the whole situation, maybe even controlling as much as car keys and groceries and all those things. There's all this control. Well, if you take that to the church, the analogy that the connection that I want to make there is that in this case, the church holds your salvation in their hands. And so you choose to stay because salvation is what is at stake. And
existential.
Right, some sort of existential reward. Piece of your reality is under their control. Right. If I walk away and I don't go to the temple anymore, or I don't go to church anymore, I don't pay my tithing, don't have a temple recommend, the idea is that then you won't go to the celestial kingdom later. You won't be with God. You won't persist as a family forever. Right. They control that idea. And then they make statements like, don't look at other church resources. Well, the implication is that, or don't look at other things outside of the church is what I meant to say.
Right. Don't look at resources or information that are not published by the church.
Right. The implication
so that's the isolating. We're going to isolate you from the outside world, which is something abusers also do.
Right. The implication is that if I do look at those other sources, I'm putting my salvation at risk. And
I feel like I'm going to get smacked by
you keep things very much in a tight, controlled situation. This goes back to, we spent a whole series talking about cult-like tendencies, things like that, all of those things that go into that. But the idea is we keep you under control. The next statement here that he makes.
So I'm going to pause you real quick before you do the next statement. So what you're talking about is the dynamic of abuse commonly found in patriarchal societies where it's, oftentimes it's the man, oftentimes it's because they have more muscle or more power, or they're the primary breadwinner, because women have been
their role
more of the servant role. There's the word I'm looking for, more of the servant role and whatnot. But I really want to talk about it as the pattern of abuser. So when you're talking about the abuser, they tend to control resources. Mm-hmm. They tend to isolate the victim from outside resources. They tend to gaslight the victim. So that way the victim is always questioning what's real. I remember as a teenager, one of the things I write about in my book is, my father would tell me, well, one of your teachers told me this, or your friend's parents said, or you don't have any friends anymore. Trauma Bonded is available anywhere books are sold. And so when I went back to the school the following year after that summer of terror where I was held captive in my own home, by the time I went back to school, I didn't even feel comfortable going to my friends and saying, hey, did you say this? Because my abuser had me so convinced that it was true that I didn't feel comfortable checking facts. I didn't feel like it was safe for me to look at outside information that might have given me different data. And that's something that the Mormon Church has done. It's something that many cult-like organizations do, where it's everything out there is bad or dangerous, or it's, you shouldn't look there because the information you're going to find is going to bring evil into your life or more harm into your life. And you're so tired of being harmed. And oftentimes you don't even realize it. Like for me as a teenager, I didn't even realize. I thought it was unfair and I was confused and I was angry and I was hurting. But why would my dad lie to me? And now as an adult, I'm like, really? So you've got to put those things into context. Okay, go ahead.
The last thing he says here is also just, troubling, but just trust us. Wherever you are in the world and you share this message with anyone else who raises the question about the church not being transparent, we're as transparent as we know how to be in telling the truth. We have to do that. That's the Lord's way. Well, let me come back to this statement again. By saying we're as transparent as we know how to be, you're silently acknowledging that you are not transparent.
Right. Usually in my field, people who say I'm really good at being honest is usually an indication that they're not, even though I said that earlier in the show. Just gonna go there. No, I would use the example of oftentimes for my children, I will say, I just need you to trust mommy right now. But the follow-up is that I've earned that trust. So yesterday when I took Abby on a tandem ride, I told her that she needed to hold on to me and that she needed to trust me to steer the horse, because she kept asking, do I need to pull the rein? Do I need to kick the horse with my feet? Do I need to? And I said, Abby, I need you to just trust me to steer Clemmy so that neither of us get scared or fall off, because she was terrified of falling off. But she also wanted to go fast. So when we went at the trot, Abby started to go and as Abby went like sliding to the side, I'm like doing this in the video and just realized my podcast listeners aren't going to be able to hear or visualize what the doots mean. Mm-hmm. So the doots mean that Abby started to lean to the side and fall off, and because she was holding on to me so tight, we both started to go off. I was the one, she was like, we're falling. And I said, just trust me. I stopped the horse. We were able to reposition ourselves. And what Abby learned in that moment is just trust me. And then within the next minutes, she learned she was safe. Therefore, that trust had data to back it up.
Right.
And I think the challenge here is just trust us. And then you get data like go ahead, Mason, into the next section.
Okay. So,
data as into.
You can't investigate church history for very long if you're outside of church resources before you start to recognize. And now even a little bit inside church resources, you can't investigate for very long before you recognize. Don't interrupt me. Before you start to recognize that the story is not as you were told as a child or as a kid, that or even as an adult, that there are a lot of other details that are not talked about.
Or there's a lot of other excuses to explain why the church was dishonest, which all you're teaching is, well, if dishonesty is, if you need people to believe you for this reason, then it's okay to lie, just pray about it.
Right. The whole stuff. The whole but thing, right? But basically just, I'm sorry, but, or those kind of things. As soon as you say the but, it's almost like you're negating whatever you said before that. And that there's a lot of that going on with church history. Yeah, he did this, but, and it's just an obfuscation. It's just, we're going to show you that it is there, but also let us explain to you why it doesn't matter.
Right. So before we move into the next section, I do want to invite our audience members. I can see that we've got some audience members with us today. Hello. If you would like to comment, we can see those comments, I believe, on most of our Facebook platforms and our YouTube platform. So if you'd like to leave us a comment really quick and engage with us, we would love to hear from you. We would love to answer your questions. And as always, welcome. All right. What's the next one you want to talk about?
So the last one actually is
No, we have two more.
I only have one more. I had another one down here, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, we have two more. We have which one are you not talking about?
The Oaks one here. I'm just going to
talk about no. We've got change. The LGBT policy change, and then we also have the SEC filings.
Okay.
We've got two more.
All right. So she's going to finish this out with that last one because we're just going historically here. So in 2015, there was a policy put in place, and if you can pull that one up, yeah. So this one describes. I want to say really
quickly, Mason, you were in the bishopric at this time. When this came out.
I was not.
What were you doing in 2015?
I was in anesthesia school.
Oh, so I didn't he was in anesthesia school. Never mind. Okay, go ahead.
So, and maybe you can remember some details. I don't really remember this coming out, so it's all me looking back at it now.
Well, I think
part of the reason why I don't remember is because it wasn't announced.
Right, they just snuck it in.
They put it in the handbook and didn't really talk about it. So this is a policy. And later on, I think it was President Nelson who talked about how they had all been together. Everybody was there. We did like the whole revelation, quote unquote, process. And everybody came to agreement that this was the right thing. That this was from God. This was revelation.
Okay, so what was the revelation?
So, and this is for those of you that can't see it, it says, the November policy is that same-sex couples, the policy considered same-sex couples to be apostates from the church. So now they're not just sinners, but they're apostates. So
right. Apostate meaning actively trying to harm the Mormon church.
Right. We've ramped up what it is now. And then this was the real kicker. Children of same-sex couples, whether biological or adopted, were barred from baptism, confirmation, ordination, participation in mission service, unless they reached adulthood and received parental consent and permission from the first presidency. This also included preventing children from receiving baby blessings.
Well, and that's nuts because you have to receive parental permission and permission from the first presidency to participate in your religious affiliation. I remember having a conversation with your mom, actually, when our son Hayden, I think it was this last visit, when our son Hayden graduated from high school. Your parents came out to visit and your mom was like, yeah, but that policy didn't harm anybody. It was making sure everybody was ready before they started. And I said, what about that youth member, who's old enough to care, the 8-year-old who doesn't get to get baptized like their friends? How does that harm that 8-year-old who doesn't get to participate in the same rituals as all of their friends, which breaks, that causes attachment trauma because you've got, my friend group that I'm attached to, I don't get to participate in the same ritual despite the fact that everything else about our religious belief is the same.
Well, or the teenager, you're othered from that.
Right, you're automatically
you're something
othered.
Different once that happens.
Right now, everybody looks at you different too. But then, as a teenager, you don't get to go into the temple. As a young man, you don't get to pass the sacrament. Like you are othered and ostracized as an innocent child because of something your parents are engaging in. And I think the major issue where the conflict is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believes you shall be punished for your own quote unquote sins and not Adam's transgression or the transgressions of somebody else. And then here we have it. A child is being quote unquote punished by not being able to participate. They are being segregated out because of this, and that somehow this was God's doing. And then in 19, go ahead.
So the point in me bringing this up, yes, all of that happened, and there's so much trauma that was involved.
And they snuck it in. It wasn't like, hey, this is the policy.
So that's the point.
Which is abnormal.
We're talking about, I shit you not, the prophet lies, right? We're talking about lying.
He said
from the leadership of the church.
Language. I'm Captain America.
Yeah. We're talking about prophets lying. Well, when you take a policy like this, that in essence denies the possibility of salvation to someone because of someone else. and you don't have the balls to come up at the podium and say, this is what we're going to do, you sneak it into the policy and send a letter to your bishop saying this is the new way things work.
No, there was no letter that's why I asked if you were in
there had to have been a letter because they didn't reprint the handbook at that time. So there had to have been a letter.
I think it was, so don't quote the details, and I should have found this before we started. I believe that what it was is that it went in on the online one, like the online one on your phones had been updated, and there was not an announcement for it, and somebody found it and leaked it, and that's how the general membership found out. And then, of course, they were irate, and then we see the suicide numbers pop up in highly populated Mormon communities. And there's that correlation is not causation, but the correlation is there that after this, suicides jumped. I don't remember how many %. We covered that at a previous episode that we will link in the show notes if you're interested in looking at that. So you have this spike in LDS or in a highly populated LDS community, adolescent teenage suicide rates. And then the other thing is that, and there was a Mormonism Live and a Mormon Stories episode on it, which we will find. I couldn't find it for our show this morning, where they claim that everybody was together unanimously, but you can, and then they claimed that from the pulpit of General Conference. I believe Nelson claimed that. And this was before he was the prophet. This is still when Monson is the prophet. But when Monson is so far gone cognitively because of age that he's not making any decisions anymore. So Nelson was pretty much at the head of everything at that point already. But he says everybody was together and unanimous, whereas Christofferson was not. And the policy, I would say that within that group of men, Christofferson is probably one of the biggest allies to the LGBTQ plus population because his brother is a member of the LGBTQ population, and I believe still an active member, or he was. And then all of a sudden, 4 years later in 2019, are you ready to go there?
No.
Oh, sorry, I'll shut up. Go.
So that's the big piece, is just that the way that it came about was just straight lies. And then as Nelson talks about the revelation process, we find out later not accurate. And
meaning that they have to be unanimous and all together.
Well, I mean, even that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, although they tout it as being the case.
Okay.
It hasn't ever had to be the case that, it's not revelation unless all 15 of us are on board. That's the way that they've taught it over the last couple of decades. It's not necessarily the way that it is scripturally. But the point being that that's how they touted it. They said that was the case. They talked about it as this big revelation. They talked about it. If you're calling it revelation, you're saying that this is from God. 3 years later, now we're rescinding it and we're calling that revelation. Well, let's just talk about the fickle asshole that is God.
Go ahead, Mason.
You can't call a revelation. It's like so American history here, right? In the early 1900s, you enact an amendment that says alcohol is illegal. And then 20 years later, after tons of craziness, this is where Al Capone comes into his power. You decide that was a really bad idea. We're going to rescind that. No more amendments. But even then, the amendment exists, both of them. And I don't remember what numbers are they, so I won't say. But for instance, the 19th Amendment says alcohol is illegal. The 21st Amendment says alcohol is not illegal anymore. Well, guess what's still in the Constitution? Both of those amendments. They both are there saying this was the legal pathway then, this is the legal pathway now. In the church, nah, we don't do that. We'd like you to just forget that happened. But in 2018, they touted as this big revelation. It's that God has spoken to us that we're not going to do that anymore. Well, then why did God speak to you 3 years ago and tell you that this is how it's going to be? It just doesn't make any sense. And what it is an obfuscation on God. We're going to blame God for this very divisive and harmful policy. And then if you can pull up the Nelson quote, Alex, this is how Nelson is going to then respond. He says, President Nelson says that the policy changes were motivated by love and that the church cares about all children of God, regardless of their sexual orientation or other unique challenges. BS. Like, it's just, that is, you can say that, you can talk about love, but you're gaslighting. You're not talking about the harm. You're not talking about the fact that we thought this would be a helpful policy. We thought this would be a helpful policy.
And we were not
most of us together decided and thought that this would be a really good policy, that this would help to strengthen people in not living that way. Because you can talk as a church that you still don't think that that's, you still call that a sin. You can call that a sin if that's what you want to do. You have that right as a church. But then
freedom of religion, freedom to be an asshole. Got it.
Right. Then say it. Say we implemented that policy because we hoped it would deter people from living that lifestyle. Right. We've recognized now, it's been 3 years. We've recognized that that is not what was accomplished.
3 years or 4 years? It was 19
I think it was,
when they undid it.
4 years.
Yeah.
It was the end of 2015. So, I don't know the time frame, but 3 or 4 years later, then you come up and you say, you know what? We implemented this policy a few years ago. We have found that the intention, that what we wanted to accomplish with this policy is not what's being accomplished. People are getting hurt.
That's
People
what you want them to say?
Right. That's what you say as a leadership. You don't come out and say, God gave us another revelation. You come out and you say, that didn't work out. That was us. It didn't work out. We're apologizing as an organization. We're apologizing as a church. This is not okay.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things that really bothers me is that as I watched this unfold, because this was one of the big cracks in my, I cannot be a active participating member anymore. Because when this was undone, I think you were the bishop at that point in 19. Yeah, you were definitely the bishop in that time. It is time for a commercial break. So I think the issue for me is how many members came to me and they were like, God is so loving to have undone this. And oh my gosh, just look at how much unconditional love and acceptance there is for the LGBTQ plus population. And I'm looking at them like, are you fucking kidding me?
Evidence that they've been gaslit.
Right. They were gaslit to the point of, yes, President Nelson loves these people. Look at what he undid. And I'm like, it's only been a couple of years. Nelson's the one who implemented it. What an asshole. You're being gaslit. But you can't tell somebody who is in that position that they're being gaslit without them digging in and being more vulnerable to continue being gaslit. So listeners, when you're dealing with this, when you see this happening, remember that unless the person comes to you and is like, this is really confusing, I'm not sure what's going on, that's when the brain is open and willing to say, hey, maybe I'm being gaslit here. Yeah. So let's talk about, are you done with that one? Okay, so let's talk about the last one. The last one is the SEC. The SEC fines and whatnot, and the church is under scrutiny again. So really quickly before I get into this one, if you're enjoying our show and you'd like to throw us a couple of bucks, we use the money to help pay our production team a livable and industry standard wage or slightly above an industry standard wage. That is our goal because we want to make sure that we throw a lot of thanks to our production team. You can do so here at Venmo. And then for those of you that don't have your cell phones out, the Venmo, let me see if I've got it on here. The Venmo thing, we do not have it on here, but it is Daisy Girl Communications is our Venmo link. So there it is. Contact us Alex is going to put one together real quick because he's amazing. Also, if you would like to contact us, you can do so at daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com. Visit our website at daisygirlcommunications.com, which is in the process of being overhauled. So some of those links may not work over the next about 6 weeks. You can always click
like and subscribe.
Right, subscribe, all those lovely things that really bump up our algorithms. There you go. Thank you, Alex. So if you would like to drop us a couple of bucks, Mason and I are financing this from our own personal funds right now. We love that. We will continue to do that. But if you'd like to help out and make sure that our production team gets those lovely dollars so we can bring you more content, we would appreciate it. All righty. So the last one here, and I'm going to, Alex, if you can put on the stage the Mormonism Live episode. So I am not very good at the details and the historical, whatever. That's just not my strong suit. But where I have found the most easy to follow, engaging, and historically factual and accurate is the Mormonism Live episode. I think that Bill Reel and Radio Free Mormon, or RFM, do a phenomenal job. So if you're looking for the data on what I'm about to talk about, you can go to their episode 180. It's one of their Mormonism Live episode 180, LDS Church's Stock Portfolio Under Scrutiny Again. And this is where, and I'm just going to just go super brief over this one, is where the Mormon Church was trying to hide how much money they had from their members for fear that people would stop paying their tithing. And that is something that they admitted to. And when you read the SEC fine letter, the church admits to that. And so basically I'm going to say, and a lot of people are going to have conspiracy theories about this, and I understand that it's very confusing, it's very hurtful, and it's kind of that in your face, hey, your church hasn't been honest with you, and so a lot of people are grappling to understand what that's like. It's actually very traumatic for the members who are in the position of, did my church actually do this? Did they not? What actually happened? Who do we believe? And so it's normal for conspiracy theories to come about when the truth is really difficult, or when you're getting mixed information so you don't even know what the truth is.
Well, then again, if you're in that place where the church can do wrong, you immediately just come up with rationalizations. I've had family members that have done that too. Things like, well, I'd rather they had the money than somebody else. Okay, fine.
Right.
But people find ways to justify it in their heads, even if it doesn't make sense.
They've been trained. You've been conditioned in the Mormon church to do that, to say my prophets won't make mistakes. Therefore, if this is what's going on, there's got to be a logical explanation or a real reason that's probably from God. And I don't need to understand that because what was it from Ballard? Just trust us. We have integrity. And so it's very difficult when you are in that childlike trust place to believe that your parents can be lying to you. If you don't believe me, just think about how easy it is to trick your kids into believing in the tooth fairy or Santa Claus. Like, I have told my kids the truth about the tooth fairy and they still believe in the tooth fairy. Like, I can't undo it. I'm waiting for them to just grow up and come out of that.
Can I pause you for just 1 second and go back to just one little piece?
No way.
All right, fine.
Of course. Thank you for asking.
I just wanted to pull out the fact that by Elder Ballard saying, we know the integrity of all of the members of the First Presidency of the Quorum of the 12, basically you've now grouped yourself with all of those people. And there's going to be numerous examples along the way of where they have not been honest. It just decreases my respect and reliability on you, in this case, Elder Ballard, because everything else that is there demonstrates that you are not telling the truth.
Right. Well, and just look at Elder Ballard's mix up with Tim Ballard, not related, but what are you going to do? And that's one of the nice things about the digital age is it's a lot easier to track evidence. Sure. So the church is under scrutiny again. And this was leaked and all of this is public. Like you can go look it up on the Widow's Mite and at the IRS. And for that information, again, remember, just go. If you need all that information, go to the Mormonism Live episode 180, LDS Church is Stock Portfolios Under Scrutiny Again. This was released just a couple weeks ago, I think. And it's that not only did they not file their Form Fs or whatever it was, they also didn't file their Form Gs. But I think the thing that really bothered me with this, where they were lying, is with the pressure of the SEC, the church had to be honest. And they signed a paper saying this is the reason, and we intentionally withheld that information, and we won't do it again. And then they got this huge to us, huge for the SEC fine of $5 million total, $4 million for Ensign Peak, $1 million for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, pennies for the Mormon church.
Yeah.
But the biggest fine, the SEC, I believe it's the biggest fine. Don't quote me on that. I believe it's the biggest fine ever from the SEC. And then come to find out, they also purposefully didn't file other papers, and they promised that they wouldn't go out and
say something different,
that they had to maintain that accountability. And within, I think it was 48 hours, they came out and said it was a miscommunication between the church leaders and the accountant. They blamed it on the accountant, and they moved forward. And so once again, we have tangible evidence that the prophets are lying to us. They say lots of different things. And so, we talked a lot today about, do you have anything else you wanted to add, by the way, before I start to wrap us up?
I don't think so.
Okay. So one of the things that we know about liars is that liars are going to lie. We also know that all humans lie on occasion. And I'm going to use the word all on purpose here, that all-inclusive. People lie. We do it to protect ourselves. It's just part of being human. And really where you can trust somebody is when that tangible evidence supports them, when you have experiences that they are being honest with you on a regular basis and you don't have evidence otherwise, which means you have to be willing to do the work to determine who is honest and who is not in their lives.
And the people that are the most untrustworthy are the ones that will not encourage you to do that.
Correct. If somebody is encouraging you not to check in with things, that's sketchy. It's incredibly difficult to recognize when you are being gaslit, when you are a victim of abuse, especially narcissistic abuse. And I would say that the church is a narcissistic organization in the sense of they've got it all. They're the only one right. Just trust us. Don't question us. Don't look outside of this. Oh, and let me gaslight you into believing what we're saying, and don't go look at any other evidence. They isolate their members from the rest of the world, and these types of things. It's very, very concerning. So again, though, if you're the victim, you have to learn how to be honest with yourself. And that's really, really difficult to do. And it takes a great deal of time. So my encouragement is question everything. Trust your gut, and continue to do that. You're not going to get one answer. Like, I can be honest. So I'll put it this way. I went the other way. I was super dishonest in my 20s. In my 30s, I learned how valuable honesty was. And by mid 30s and forward, I've almost become honest in the other way and telling the truth even when it hurts me on occasion, because I've worked so hard to be trustworthy, because that is one of the most important things to me in my life now. And I do a pretty decent job. Mason, would you agree with me? You better agree with me. When I start to exaggerate within a minute or so, I'm able to go, you know what? I'm probably blowing that up a little bit. Let me back off. This would be a more accurate representation of what's going on. You want to see those patterns. You want to see those patterns change. What I think most of us want from the LDS church is the accountability of, hey, we made mistakes. Don't blame it on somebody else. Just own it, that accountability. And then that empathy piece. There was a recent episode done, I believe, on Mormonism Live as well, about the fake apology on the racial stuff and how much that, and we're gonna probably do an I Shit You Not episode on this as well. So this is your little preview. I'm foreshadowing what's coming here. But that it harmed people. The fake apology harmed people. And then, there's my kids going potty. If you heard that door close. If you read that, one of the reasons why it was so harmful was because the words were spoken that people needed. And then when it was removed immediately, there was a huge amount of betrayal trauma. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. So when those types of things occur, when you get that little taste of what it feels like to have that healing, hold on to it, investigate it, stay curious, use your critical thinking skills. If you are a victim of abuse and you need help, please call or text 988 and report it. Okay. Mental health crises also means victims. There's also a lot of abuse hotlines. I did not look that up. Alex, if you could look up the National Abuse Hotline, I would appreciate it. Most of your abuse hotlines for both adults and for children can now be reported online anonymously. You can always dial 911. I actually have heard of people dialing 911 and doing things like ordering pizza so that they get your address and whatnot. And the police are obligated to come out and do a welfare check. So that way you have the help that you need. If you recognize that you are in a life-threatening situation, please reach out. There are resources for you, and be gentle with those. Thank you so much, Alex, for getting that as quickly as you did. So we've got 1-800-799-SAFE, which is 7233. So 800-799-7233. So I want to give you those numbers. There's other numbers. I'll let Alex do that. Again, for those of you who are just listening, I'll say that slower because I do tend to talk really, really fast. So Alex, can you put that back up again? I'm sorry. 1-800, the abuse hotline, Alex. There we go. Okay, domestic violence hotline is 1-800-799-7233. 800-799-SAFE. If you need help, reach out. And then for those of us on the outside looking in, remember, it statistically takes 7 times of a person attempting to leave an abusive situation before they are able to walk away fully and embrace their independence. And so for those of us on the outside of an abusive organization, those numbers are very similar. I don't have a statistic to give it to him, but I know that like Mason, I'll use Mason, correlation is not causation, but he would get mad about a topic, but then stay in the church, get mad about a topic and then stay in the church. And it took quite some time before he was able to truly walk away. If you or someone you know is in crisis, call 988, the National Mental Health Crisis and Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I have called that. I've texted that. It kept me alive. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your skill or education level is. We all experience crises at times. And so I want you to have those resources for reaching out. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate those of you who joined us today. If you would like to reach out and have a question, or you want to be on the show and let us rummage through your shit and unpack it, all you have to do is email us at daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We will chat with you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Peace.
How about this one? Give us the money by Venmo at Daisy Girl Communications.